Hey guys, what's up? And welcome to my Milky Way editing tutorial that's going to be covering my way of editing Milky Way shots, starting in Lightroom and then finishing it in Photoshop. So if you've gotten a shot like this and you wondered what you can do to make it look a lot better, make the colors pop, stay for the ride. Okay, so before I begin, I'd like to say that in my opinion, and from what I've seen online before, there are two different approaches to editing Milky Way shots. Approach number one, both depend on what you want to get as an end result. So approach number one is to get a super fancy, color popping picture that only looks good in super scaled down resolution, like 800 by 600 or 1280 by 960 or whatever. It's your like average, I don't know, Instagram or Facebook shot or whatever. And if that's what you want, you can take this tutorial as well, but push the editing and post-processing a lot further. But be warned that you are going to eventually end up with an unusable file if viewed at 100% or viewed at a high resolution. And approach number two, which is the one that I'm going to be taking in this video, is to get a file that looks good, but has a very nice compromise between destroying the fine detail and in the image viewed at 100% compared to what you get as an end result. So that you can later on use the image to, I don't know, use some other graphic design project or, print it in larger size or whatever you want to do. We're going to try to be smart with our editing. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to import your stack into Lightroom. Now, in case you do not have a stack and you shot only one image, I'm going to cover why you made a pretty big mistake and you'll correct it in the future. But either way, you import your one or your multiple images in Lightroom and you start by editing the first one. So this is shot on a Canon 6D Mark I using a Rokinon or Samyang 24mm f1.4 lens at 2.8 aperture. I used an ISO 3200 and I used an 8-second exposure. Now, you might wonder, why did I only use an 8-second exposure? Well, I needed this shot to be able to use it at a high resolution, and it's going to be viewed at a higher resolution, so I wanted to avoid any possible signs of star trails. And I could have easily pushed for maybe 10 or 12 seconds, but I needed this for work, and I wanted to be on the safe side. That's a thing number one. Thing number two, I could have maybe gone for 15 or 20 shots, but the clouds were rolling in, so I wanted to hurry up. Getting many shots is important for later on using in median stacking in Photoshop, which I'll go through. But as I said, if you have if you have a single photo, if you have 10 or 20, it doesn't really matter. Just step by step, and we'll see how far we can get with one, and then we'll see how far we can get with multiple. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is, of course, we'll go into the develop module, and what we want to do is get the exposure just a bit. I don't like to play with exposure too much because raising the exposure introduces a lot of noise, and we want to maintain and keep as much detail as possible. And then I would like to get my temperature to what I feel works for me. Something like this to begin with, I guess. Now, one of these options, I guess, are modifiers that do not affect noise levels as much or at all, maybe even, but affects the general visual perception of the image, are the highlights. So I've increased the highlights to 100. There isn't really much additional noise in the image, but look at how much more detail and stars and Milky Way popping that we got by that. So that's pretty cool. Shadows don't really do much. I mean, if you if you raise the slider up, you don't do anything. If you get it down, the only thing that you see a bit of detail show up is in this cloudy area of the Milky Way. So I just don't like to play with shadows. Leave them as they are. Whites are generally a good thing because they made the image pop. But my problem with whites is that they do kind of the same thing as the exposure would do. They introduce additional noise, which we don't really want. So I guess you can use just a bit of whites, maybe let's say a plus 30 or up to 40. I wouldn't go over 40. And blacks are decent, but you shouldn't really go crazy with them either. Maybe a minus 10, minus 14. So yeah. Okay, so this is looking decent so far. So compared to, you know, like the original import, this is already looking a lot better. So the next thing that we can do is I like to get rid of the sharpening. Sharpening increases noise, and we can deal with the sharpening later in Photoshop. So I'm gonna take the sharpening off. As far as noise reduction, I have a bit of mixed feeling about noise reduction. If you go too crazy with noise reduction, you're gonna lose a lot of detail. But maybe for this image, we can go to maybe plus 15, let's say. I think that will be or maybe even plus 10. Just a slight bit of noise reduction, I think, can help. The next thing that I'd like to do is, if you go to remove chromatic aberrations, it usually doesn't really do much with star photos. But for example, take a look here. Without chromatic aberrations, there's a more purple. It kind of evens it out. So I would leave chromatic aberrations for now, but you should definitely view your image at 100% before you use this and see if it works or not. Profile corrections. Okay, so every lens introduces some sort of a problem, and the same applies for the Rokinon lens as well. If you don't really see it here, but if you look at the thumbnail, you will see that this area here is like hazy bright. This part here is dark. This part is like vignetting and stuff. So we're gonna try to get rid of that. So I select Rokinon. It's in 24 F1.4, and you see that these dark corners are evened out. But this introduced another problem. Now the central circular part of the image is darker than the borders. So I like to even it out, but by reducing vignetting so that the image is even. As much as possible, and then I'll deal with it in Photoshop later on. And the final step that we can do in Lightroom, that I like to do, is play with the curves a bit. You can manually adjust the curves, but I think the most easiest way for a lot of us is to just click on the adjust tone curve by dragging in the photo. You click on it, and what you want to do is that you want to basically add some curve-based contrast to the image. So what you should generally do is just find the brightest part of the Milky Way you can. For me, I think this is the part, and you get it up a bit, and then you find the darker part of the image or the photo, and you put it down a bit, and you will introduce some contrast. So this was before, this is after. See, it popped a bit, but never ever go too crazy with this, because I mean, you can go crazy in case you just want, you know, a crazy image for your Facebook or whatever, but if you want to preserve details, you should be really careful when using this. Okay, so we are done with the basic stuff. So now what I like to do is I like to go to the adjustment brush section, And I would like to add a bit more everything to the Milky Way itself. So I will paint over the Milky Way. And we can further add some pop by adjusting this area. But just a bit, not too much. Never go too crazy with this. Also, what I would like to do is, I don't want to deal with this in Photoshop later on, but you can, or actually I might deal with this. There is a part of the tree that's probably being seen on every photo in this corner. Let me show you that. And there is some crazy haze here. I'm not really sure what's causing it. But either way, what I'm going to do is I'm gonna get rid of the thingy on the bottom. And I'm gonna get rid of the thing on the top as well, just to make this a bit faster. If you wanna maintain those additional pixels, you of course can do this in post-processing. And now, compared to the original, we are already getting quite a bit more than what we started with. This is starting to look okay, if I may say so. Now the next step would be, you can play a bit more here with the certain options. You can maybe pump the whites a bit, but it all depends on what you really want. You know, if you're happy with what you've got, if you have one image, you don't really have a lot of options. But if you count on reducing noise by median stacking in Photoshop, I don't think you should push this more than you've already have done. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with this. We've done everything we should have done. The only thing that I'm not certain of right now is the noise reduction. This area here feels most affected by noise, and we definitely do get some benefits from using noise reduction, but I'm just afraid that we're losing too much compared to what we are gaining. I'm gonna bump it up a bit more. I went from 10 to 15, and I'm gonna leave it there. I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so the next step to do, if you have only one image, you can play with this a bit more. But if you have more, you go to copy settings, you check all, you copy, and then you paste this to rest of the images in your stack. So all the development and cropping and stuff gets applied to the remaining images. Okay, so now what you gotta do is you select these images, you go to, you right click and you edit, and you go to open layers in Photoshop. But before you do that, you should make sure that where exactly are the preferences here? What? Are you serious that I can't find it? Okay, preferences. In external editing, your file format should be TIFF, ProPhoto RGB, and 16-bit components. Now let's get something straight. If you have a slower computer, if you have like less than 16 gigs of RAM, maybe you should choose 8-bit. I don't think it's gonna make like that much of a difference, but you know, 16-bit components, it says that, you know, smaller and more compatible, but will not preserve fine tonal detail as well as 16-bit. So I don't know, just to be on the safe side, select TIFF, Pro Photo RGB, 60-bit components. Resolution doesn't really matter. Compression, I'm gonna choose none because I feel it's gonna be faster without compression. So click OK, we click edit, and we open as layers in Photoshop, which is probably gonna take a while. Okay, and we are back. Everything is opened as layers in Photoshop, and now we can view the image. And what we need to do first is we need to get rid of all the stuff that we don't really like. And in this case, I already know, since this is my camera, I know that I have a red pixel somewhere here. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to be using a spot healing brush tool. Also, I'm gonna check every single image for strong trails like this one here, or even stronger ones. So I'm just gonna edit this. I'm gonna be using for everything, I'm just gonna be using a spot healing brush tool. So I'm gonna fast forward this to when all the images are edited. Okay, and we are back. Everything's been cleared and clean, and whatever. And now we can proceed. So next step to do is you need to align the stars. So we select all the layers. You go to edit, and you go to auto align layers. I've never really gotten into a situation where auto align didn't really do a good job. So I'm gonna trust it again with this. It can be problematic if you have some landscape here that doesn't move like stars do, but that's a completely different editing method in Photoshop and aligning method. So I'm not gonna go into this right now. We don't have this, we just have the Milky Way. Okay, we have our stars aligned, and we've gotten this white border, which we are going to get rid of. Okay, so now that that is done, the next step to do is to convert this into a smart object. So you select all the layers and you convert to smart object. And this is probably going to take a while. Yay, we have our smart object. So the next step to do, and pretty much the final step for now, is to go to layers, smart object, and stack mode. And you should take the stack mode median. And what's that going to do? It's going to pretty much stack the light information from all different layers within our smart object, and it's gonna reduce the noise and not lose us any details. Now we need to wait for this to complete. This should be faster than our previous action. Okay, so we are done with our median stack. And let's see what we've got. So this is before the median stack. And this is after. So basically, we've maintained all the color information and a lot of the detail, and we got rid of a lot of noise. So as to just to slightly teleport you back to the beginning of the video when I said that maybe I should have taken more shots, I wonder if, let's say, taking 20 shots would yield better results with the median stack. Perhaps it would. So now that we have this, we can rasterize the smart object because we don't need it to be smart object anymore. It's just going to be easier to work with. And we can do our final edits on this image within the Photoshop. Okay, so from this point, this is the point where you would basically end up whether you'd have 10 stacks or whether you would have only one image. The same rule from this point onward applied. The only difference between those of you that had one shot and those of you that had many is the noise detail. We have less noise because we have many images. You're going to have more noise, so you just be more careful with, you know, where you take this image from now on. So, okay, the first thing that I personally don't like about this image is this dark corner here and this dark corner here and this hazy area here. Now, I am completely aware that this could have been sorted out within Lightroom. And maybe that's something that should have been done there, but I usually do this kind of stuff in Photoshop because I find it a lot more easy and convenient. And let me show you the way I deal with it. So basically, I deal with it using burn and dodge tools. Now, burn and dodge tools are generally something that you should avoid because it does less good than it does harm. However, from my experience in dealing with Milky Way shots, you don't really lose a lot and you can gain a lot. So first, we're gonna get rid of these super light areas here. So we can just even it out a bit. Okay, so this is already better. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I start, I'm gonna make a copy of this so we can see the before and after. Oh, easier. You know, just slightly, you know, just to even it out. The smaller your image is in the editor, the kind of easier it is maybe to see what you're doing. See before, see now, it's a lot better already, right? Well, at least in my opinion it is. The same thing I'm going to apply to this area here, just in less, it's less hazy, so I guess it needs less, lower amount of brush strokes, I guess. Okay, so I'm okay with this. Now I still don't like the complete darkness in this corner and in this corner, so we're gonna try to fix that with dodge tool. Just a tiny bit, and just a tiny bit here. You can see this is a lot more even now, and it is looking a lot more pleasant. I'd like to additionally burn this part here just a bit. I think it's too bright for no reason. Okay. Now what you can do, if you don't really care about the fine detail, you can use the dodge tool and greatly increase the strength of your Milky Way. But I'm not gonna do that because I don't personally like how it looks, and we're gonna deal with that a bit later using a different method. Okay, so I'm happy with how this image is looking right now. I think all the parts of the image are even, and we can go to the next step. So I'm gonna adjust the levels just a bit to even further out lower the haze. This is pretty good. We're gonna play with the color balance a bit as well. I'd like just a bit more actually, you know what? I prefer it without the color. It's quite fine as it is. I will play with the saturation a bit. Just pop a bit more color into this. And I'm additionally going to play with the curves. You can use the same method. By increasing the white parts and reducing the black parts just a bit. Okay, so at this point, I'm fairly satisfied with how this looks. So the next step is, since we're working on a 16-bit file, a lot of the filters are gonna have a hard time dealing with this. And this is looking okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to Control-Shift-Copy this so that everything applies. And I'm going to make a new file. Paste it there, and I'm gonna convert it to 8-bit. Okay, with that done, I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but like, I don't see any difference, but who knows? It's better be safe than sorry. So now that we have that sorted out, I'm gonna make a copy of this layer. And I'm going to see what our FreeWare boundary noise reduction filter does. It removes noise, but at the same time, it removes a lot of details. But for us currently, we are okay with that. We're even going to go a bit more crazy. We're going to push this even more to try to remove all the noise from the image. Or maybe not. And I'll explain to you why. So now we have this layer that is going to have its noise removed. And it looks okay like from here, but it looks pretty bad when viewed at 100%. But we're not going to view this at 100%. We did this so that when we use the color dodge blending mode, we get more color in the Milky Way, but we don't introduce more noise because the layer that we color dodge doesn't really contain that much noise. But this is the point where it gets a bit too crazy. So what you want to do is you want to remove or adjust how much of the color dodge layer you actually use. I think this is pretty okay. Also, you can use a layer mask, but if that's too complicated, you can just delete this part here. And then you still have a darker cloud and Milky Way that's popping out a bit. So yeah, I think I'm gonna call it here. I did a few things that I decided not to include in the video. They're not a part of this image, of course. I undo them, or whatever the word is. It doesn't really matter. I believe that from this point onward, any further adjustment or something you might wanna do would require a lot more time and fine tuning, and honestly, that would be probably boring for you guys to watch. I'm pretty happy with this. We got from this as a starting point to this without losing a lot of quality and still having an image that looks decent when viewed at 100%. Can be used for larger prints. You can, I don't know, resize it for high resolution wallpaper. It's T650, right? What's the resolution of the 27-inch? I think it's 200%. No. Looks pretty damn good. Okay, if you have any questions, drop them down below. I'll try my best to answer most of them or all of those that are relevant. If you would like to see any more similar videos or just in general Photoshop, Lightroom related videos from me, if I find it interesting, I might do them. If you would like to see maybe a vlog style video of the next time I go to shoot some stars, I might do that as well. That could be fun. And yeah, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I didn't waste too much of your time for nothing. If any of the things you've seen help you get the better shot next time you go shooting Milky Way or night sky, I'm very happy for you. Also, it's always fun to come back to some old shots and try some things that you've seen or learned. So yeah, let me know how it goes. And until next time, happy star hunting.